Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast, where we talk about the biggest and the best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I am John Agroni, film editor for theyoungfolks.com. And from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's a news and entertainment writer at Collider. It's Will Ashton.
Hello, hello.
Will, we have a special guest.
Yes, we do.
By popular demand.
Sure.
He's been known to brandish himself, self-described Jordan Peele stalker, I think is the word that he uses. Yeah. And Jordan Peele does as well. And his lawyers. It is, of course, Adonis Gonzalez. Say hi, Adonis.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Lovely to be back.
He didn't do it. He didn't say hi, Adonis, Will. I was wrong. Boy. I was so sure he was going to do it.
Man, that was...
Oh, my... Oh,
I didn't think about that. Wait, can we run it back? Can we go back? Can we just do the intro?
Nope. No, it was a test, Adonis. I had it all planned out. I was going to kick you off the show.
Oh, okay. Well...
See,
we still can run it back.
You actually passed, Adonis.
The night is young. You never know.
John set you up to fail, and you actually won. So I would take this as a victory lap.
I tried to make a spectacle out of podcasting hosting.
A spectacle, you'd say.
And I got bit.
I'd be lying if I said I knew what John was even talking about right now. So I'm just reveling in John.
Will was in on it from the start. What a liar. Will was just like, yeah, John, it's a great idea. Can't wait.
Will knew the whole time. We thought he was oblivious, but no, he's been using it to...
He's a puppet master, you know? He's got his whole amusement park of schemes. Anyway.
I was going to say, I think this is fitting timing to bring Adonis back on the show, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the last time you were on the show, Adonis, was when we were talking about Candyman, which Jordan Peele didn't direct.
It's only been
but he
a year since Candyman. Huh.
He did co-write and produce that film. So you are, your regular Jordan Peele contributor for this podcast.
I mean, I'm stalking him. I might as well just go ahead and talk about his filmography. I mean, I knew about Note before anyone else did. I saw the notes on his desk. It's kind of hard to see from far away, but you know.
Yeah, you would have voted for Note a third time.
Of course. A fourth time if I could.
Well, welcome back, Adonis Gonzalez. Adonis Gonzalez, please tell the listeners, who are you, where are you from, what you up to?
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just a simple country boy from Arizona, California bred, but Arizona raised, living it out in the city on the East Coast. I won't say which one. I'm learning internet safety. You know, can't just throw out there where you're at. There's a Starbucks in the city, though. I'll let you know that. That's a little hint. And you know, I'm just living my life out here, doing the cliche, working in a restaurant, getting tips kind of thing. You know how it is. Brie Larson's character or not Brie Larson. I'm blanking on her name. That's awful. Cinderella, you know, Baby Driver.
Oh, Lily James.
Lily James. Yes, thank you. Not Brie Larson. You know, just doing my thing. That's who I am.
Well, here's a tip for the listeners. Follow Adonis on Twitter.
Please.
At Adogon. What's the number?
21.
I forget. 2121. No, just 121. 21. That's it. I like to think of you, Adonis, as like if I was at like a Best Buy, let's say a Best Buy or a Fry's in LA, you know, you'd be that guy I'd come, you know, I'd walk up to and we would just go on a big adventure together.
Oh, absolutely.
Randomly, strangers.
I'm the leader of the Geek Squad. I'm going to show you I'm like the Bed Bath & Beyond guy who shows you the Beyonds.
Oh, yeah. You're a real Christopher Walken kind of guy.
I was going to say I'm a real click. Yeah.
You're also working on our Nope review for The Young Folks.
I am,
and
yes.
I'm very excited to... I don't know what you think of this movie like in detail yet. I haven't read your review or, you know, you're still putting that together. And I don't know what Will thinks about this movie, which is... It's rare. Usually he comes out of movies and he just gives me like paragraph upon paragraph, but he's been coy. He's been quiet. Who knows what that means? And I feel a little scared to look him in the eye right now because, you know, who knows what'll happen. But yeah, we are talking about a new Jordan Peele movie. This is the first time we've ever had a special guest for a Jordan Peele movie. We have covered his last two films on Cinemaholics.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, I forgot that Get Out was one of our first ever reviews.
I think it was like episode 2 or 3. Yeah, because our first... I think
3. I think
we started... 3. I'll look at it. We started Cinemaholics with a simple goal. No, we started with like Lego Batman and John Wick Chapter 2. I'll never forget. And, you know, podcast was born. And Get Out was like one of the first like kind of not heated discussions, but big disagreements between me and Will. Adonis, do you know about this?
I don't actually. I do not.
Who do you think liked Get Out more, me or Will?
Oh,
I'm trying not to give it away with my face, but it's tough,
I think I'm gonna bet on Ashton. I think I'm gonna say Will liked Get Out more than you did, John. Am I wrong?
Oh, do you want to tell him, Will? Do you want to be that guy?
Oh no.
No, he is correct. That I actually had to kind of come around a little bit more on Get Out. I liked it when I saw it, but I think I've grown to like it more upon rewatch and then with the introspection and then also reading more about the film.
Yeah, you weren't a hater.
Yeah, I wasn't a hater. No.
You were just more critical, I think, than the consensus. Because at the time, I remember there was a lot of hyperbole. There was a lot of like, get out of here if you didn't like the film.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, you just had some, you had some critiques. I think that you kind of you had a little bit, if I'm recalling correctly, you were a little bit of like, I'm not sure why everybody is like super high up on this. And it was more of like, you're trying to investigate that a bit. And I did my best to help, but there's only so much I could do.
Well, again, like I said, I think I've come around on it pretty high. I don't know. I mean, I was trying to think
that year. I think by the time we got to Oscars, you were kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was around then. Then also, I remember rewatching Get Out before Us, and then I really grew to like the movie about as much, I think, as everyone else does. I don't know. I think it hit me a lot more the second time as opposed to the first viewing, which I think tends to be the case for a lot of Jordan Peele films. I know a lot of people have grown to like Us more upon rewatch. I think we were somewhat in the minority, I guess, as far as like being so high on Us compared to some of our colleagues, and then we'll see how we favor as far as Nope is concerned. But yeah, I mean,
well, I've gotten 6 emails since you just said that, each of them, and they're not listening, they're all from listeners though, saying, hey, can you read the part of Will's Us review where he talks about Get Out? And I guess I'll just do that because I have it right here conveniently, ironically, and coincidentally. So cool. This is what Will said about Get Out in his Us review from 2019, March 22nd. Okay. Are you guys ready? You look ready. Okay. I did find Get Out to be well-made, compelling, engaging, pulpy, and above all else, a timely horror film. That's Will. Mm-hmm. But I was too focused on its imperfections and admittedly overlooked a few of its triumphs. Mm-hmm. So that's our Will Ashton, He's just always grown. He's grown up.
He's willing. I love it, Will, because you're willing to acknowledge that sometimes your opinion will change on a movie. Give it time.
I don't do that. I'm way too proud and egotistical. I never admit when I'm wrong.
I had a thought the other day about Justice League, the original, the 2017, and I was like, maybe that wasn't such a bad film. Immediately rejected that idea because there's no way I'm revisiting that.
Is there? I'm trying to. There have been plenty of movies that I didn't like at first. I came around on, but I can't think of one on the spot. I'm sure there is. Will's probably just like I can count him down if you want.
It was Once Upon a Time for me, for sure.
Wait, did you say one, Will?
Well, no, I was going to, but then I was caught off guard by Adonis not liking Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, apparently.
I'm sorry. I like it now. I do.
Okay.
The first time I saw it, it was a little, I understood what it was.
That movie grew on me too, actually. I was kind of with you, Adonis.
Yeah. I remember we were like, yeah, it was okay, but I wouldn't say it was like, because there were a lot of people saying, oh, this is Tarantino's best yet. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
Hateful Eight did just come out, right? Like, I don't know.
But yeah, Get Out, good movie, really good movie. And then Us, I really, really liked Us. Jordan Peele's sophomore film. I liked the class warfare angle. I liked, oh my gosh, Lupita Nyong'o in that movie. I liked the whole set of it. I thought it was thoroughly creepy. Very good movie. I mean, I don't know how to compare it to Get Out. They're so different, but I love both the movies. But have we grown in our estimation of Us? Has it changed at all? Will, Adonis? Who knows?
For as much as I was talking about how much his movies get better upon rewatch, I actually haven't seen that one more than once, but I do want to rewatch at some point. But I mean, just, reflecting upon it, I feel like my opinion hasn't really changed. Maybe gone down slightly as far as like the ending is concerned, but I still really love that last shot. I mean, I just think the twist is still like maybe a little too easy to predict, but I mean, I think that last metaphoric shot is just so good that I still reflect fondly on that whole experience, even with the end included.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I gotta say too, I mean, I gotta admit, I've only watched Us and Get Out one time each. I should rewatch them. You're right. I'm gonna do it. But Adonis, what about you? Has it changed for you with Us? I feel like you liked it when it came out.
I really enjoyed Us when it came out. It hasn't changed much. I've only seen Us and Get Out, I think, like twice each. So they're definitely due for a rewatch for me as well. But no, not much changed after Us. I think Us even more so than Get Out, watching it the second time, there was a lot more to like grab onto, I guess. And like once we get into Nope, I think that's going to be the case for me when I eventually go out and see it again. So yeah, I think I enjoyed Us like just as much, if maybe not a little bit more. It hasn't really changed that much in my standing. I think we'll talk about this later. I still think Us is like Peele's best film. But we'll talk about that later when we get into this one.
See, I'm not as confident in like ranking any of his movies.
It's hard, yeah.
You know, maybe we'll talk more about Peele kind of as a filmmaker as we go, but kind of getting into Nope, I think for me, one of the things I appreciate about this guy, he's only been coming out with movies over the last 5 years, right? He's made 3. And, you know, some people forget, I guess. And hey, there's a whole generation of people who might not even know of the Jordan Peele that we grew up with, right? The Key and Peele Jordan Peele, the Mad TV Jordan Peele, right? And he's a guy who people didn't see coming. You know, he's a guy who, you know, didn't just start in comedy. He started in sketch comedy, and then out of nowhere, he's making these kind of like socially conscious blockbuster movies that are smart and layered and just very easy to talk about and dissect. They're they're great podcast fodder. Yeah. Right. In fact, if anything, I feel like we're due for you know, a sort of conversation, a do-over conversation about Get Out. Well, because we only talked about that movie for like 20 minutes or something, and it had just come out. Yeah, you know, I remember it wasn't that deep a discussion, and we were still finding our sea legs, of course, you know.
Sure.
You know, but I think that at this point, especially when we were getting into Us, we were definitely a little bit more of like, okay, this guy's a force. You know, he's not just able to make movies that critics like. He's able to make a movie that audiences are like, I want to see this in the movie theater. If it's Jordan Peele, he's already kind of building out a signature touch as a director. Do you agree with that, Will?
Yeah, he's a regular marquee name at a time when filmmakers, like the new guard filmmakers at least, are finding a hard time establishing themselves as much. Not for a lack of talent, but rather for a lack of...
Right? Well, sure, coming out with a big Netflix movie right now, and you who could care less?
Yeah, I mean, they shot themselves in the foot by acting like they're high and mighty, better than the theaters or whatever, with their interviews, and their press tour and all that. But I was going to say,
but I think that's immaterial. That they could have not said that, and I think it still would be a big old shrug to the ground.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, I don't think that's the reason why it's getting such a passive response. But going back to your earlier point as far as Jordan Peele and his career trajectory, yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that's so fascinating about Jordan Peele is that I can't really compare him to anyone else. Like, I mean, we were talking about this, you and me, John, like maybe like Terry Gilliam, as far as like going from being like a Monty Python guy to like, you know, being the guy who makes Brazil and, you know, Time Bandits and 12 Monkeys,
which
and whatnot.
Are still kind of culty movies, though. They're not like...
Sure.
That's the thing. Is like you can't really compare it to Peele, who's making like big movies, like movies that everybody's talking about.
And Oscar-winning films, or at least an Oscar-winning film.
There's an air of prestige. Yeah. Get Out got screenplay.
Yes. I mean, I just think he is kind of just on his own plane right now, and it's really fascinating. And I think he's using that influence for good, certainly as a producer. I think he's doing a lot of interesting and compelling things, though I'll admit that I think his producing work isn't quite as intriguing as what he's been doing as a director.
Yeah, few misses. You got Twilight Zone, Candyman. Yeah, it hasn't been amazing.
I mean, I haven't seen the Twilight Zone reboot. I thought I heard the first season and maybe the second were pretty... Did it only get 2 seasons or did it get a third one?
I think 2, but I'm not 100% sure because going back to that, I just don't think it's a very successful thing compared to his other work.
I do think there is something to be said about, as we mentioned before, I think when he is only a screenwriter and a producer, I think his work isn't quite as confident. I mean, I guess we're maybe a little more negative than most on Candyman, but I just don't think that movie really came together too well, and that was a pretty big disappointment for me last year. And I think going back to like something like Keanu, I remember being kind of let down. Maybe I'm due for a rewatch of that one as well, but I think that one was kind of an overstretched premise. So I'm not quite as sold in Jordan Peele when he is just in screenwriting mode, but I think as a director, there's no denying the confidence and just the way that he's able to compel a narrative and make all these like original compelling images and, you know, make, as we've been mentioning, entertaining films that, you know, you can just dissect them, think about them a lot, but you can also just enjoy them as, you know, big pulpy entertaining blockbusters as well.
I'll say real quick. Monkey Paw Productions has a lot of films under its belt outside of just Jordan Peele's directorial efforts. So, because you also have Keanu, who's the first one. Black Klansman, one of the most successful in terms of awards. And then
sure, yeah.
Honk for Jesus Save Your Soul, which premiered at Sundance this past year, which I thought was good. I forget where you landed on it. Yeah, I thought it was good.
Wasn't crazy about it, but I didn't hate it.
Okay. So it was a real Get Out kind of thing for you. Anyway, Adonis, what about you? Because, we've talked about Jordan Peele, I think, but, what do you think is so special about the guy?
That's honestly a question I've been trying to figure out because, Will's right. There's nobody that comes to my mind besides, I guess the obvious one is like, a lot of people say he's like the new Hitchcock, like he's the kind of director who comes in and just kind of makes something that you're not sure what to expect come the end of the runtime, but even then it's like Hitchcock and Peele are such different directors. Like when you really get down to them, I think that Peele is obviously inspired by him, just like he's inspired by so many different directors of the past. Like there's a lot of Kubrick, a lot of Terry Gilliam, I think, but I don't think that like he necessarily bases his career off of any of them. I think he just kind of leaps off of theirs as like a jumping point, like, okay, here's what came before me, but I'm going to do something different. So I think Peele is like, I think what's special about him is that he has a very good understanding of like how Hollywood works, how storytelling works, but he also has a very good understanding of who he is as a director. And there doesn't seem to be, at least it doesn't look like there's any big like studio interference when it comes to like his vision. And I guess that's mainly because like Monkey Paw Productions is a lot like his baby, But I was going to ask, did either of you see Lovecraft County on, I don't remember if it's Lovecraft County or
Lovecraft Country.
Country, okay, on HBO. Did you see that?
Yeah. I did watch that.
I did not.
Very, very interesting show.
Yeah.
it was one that it had me in the first half, not gonna lie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I do remember that because John, for like the first like 4 or 5 episodes, is like, well, you gotta watch this. You gotta watch this. I think Abby was also like, you gotta watch this. You gotta watch it.
I still think you should watch the first like 4 or 5 episodes. They're really good, and they stand alone. They're not. It's kind of episodic.
Yeah, I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying TV is one of those things where if I know someone who isn't watching a show I love, I don't get mad at them because there's just so much TV right now. Mm-hmm. But I feel like that's sometimes an etiquette that you don't really subscribe to, where you'll get mad at me if I'm not watching some show like Abbott Elementary or whatever, and I'm like, I'm sorry, there are a bazillion other shows I want to watch, including older ones. Please forgive Will. He knows not what he does.
Come on, Will. There's no space for Abbott Elementary in your.
I'm not saying there's not. No. Now you're putting words in my mouth, which I don't think you should.
Here's the issue, Adonis. The issue is that Will be like, you know what, John, I'd like to. Thanks for the recommendation. Thanks for thinking of me and treating me with kindness and respect and friendship. But I'm just so busy. And I'm like, that's understandable. Will, you're busy. You don't have time. And then he's just like, anyway, I'm rewatching some Tim Heidecker thing that I already watched 12 times. And I'm like, okay. Tim Heidecker, that's fine.
Co-star of Us.
That's fair. That's fair. There's so many things people have been telling me to watch. I'm just now, don't tell the internet, I'm just now getting into Fleabag because I've just been watching Star Wars. Recently I've just been
texting the internet right now.
Please don't tell them. They're going to be so upset. I haven't seen The Sexy Priest yet. I don't get the memes. I just know that.
Is it true that apparently She-Hulk, they were like, we want this to be, Marvel's Fleabag, I think they said.
Well, they also said She-Hulk is going to be Marvel's first, first, syndicated comedy or something, or it's going to be the first one to, give off that vibe. And I'm just like, I'm pretty sure they all did that.
Did they forget about Hawkeye?
Did they forget about all of them? But, Marvel is pretty much a sitcom, but...
Sure.
Yeah.
I thought they were going more for an Ally McBeal kind of thing.
That's what I thought. I'm a little Better Call Saul.
I haven't seen any trailers or I haven't seen any of the promotional marketing stuff, so I don't know if this has already been established. But to me, it's kind of wild that you have 2 Marvel characters who are superhero lawyers in the same city. It's a little bit like you got Daredevil over here, She-Hulk over here. They both have their own shows. We gonna do something? Is there gonna be a big case? And why am I asking these questions when we should be talking about
I don't want to be Kevin Feige, but I'm certain we're getting Daredevil in She-Hulk. it's a missed opportunity for sure if we don't. But
well, I mean, I think they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that confirmed at this point?
I don't think anyone
know.
said
I don't want to just make guesses, wild and speculative.
Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway,
so
going back
Nope was
to
directed by.
Yeah. Well, I do want to say, I mean, one thing I do kind of worry about, going back to something Adonis said, is that I do think there is a sort of pressure that's put on Jordan Peele. Like, you're not alone, Adonis, in saying that people are saying like, oh, he's like the new Hitchcock. He has very Hitchcockian influence and all that. And Kubrick, as you mentioned. And, you know, people have been saying about Carpenter and whomever else, like Spielberg. And M. Night Shyamalan as well. And I think the latter is probably the most interesting because that was another filmmaker who people were so eager to compare to, you know, Spielberg and Hitchcock, to the point where, you know, I mean, they're very flattering compliments, but I think even Jordan Peele has come out and been like, don't compare me to these other filmmakers. Like, I don't want that burden, you know, that's a lot of pressure. And also, I think he just wants to establish himself as his own filmmaker. Now, with that said, there is a filmmaker. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
He's a comedian at heart. He doesn't want to take himself too seriously, right?
Oh, for sure.
I think that's true. Yeah. And I think there's a lot, and that I think it's something about this film that I think some folks, I don't want to, you know, speak for either of you, but I know some folks I think are kind of undermining how funny Nope can be. Like, I don't know. I feel like films and reviews. Yeah. Like,
well, I've seen
I feel like
people
it's a
just
pretty
be
funny
like,
film.
Will and I were complaining about this earlier in terms of like film criticism. And a common film criticism I tend to hear that can be true, but sometimes I hear it gets like overused and abused, is like the tone is all over the place. When I think that like, no, the tone isn't all over the place. I think it has, like, scenes have different tones. Like, movies aren't just the same mood and same like emotion all the way through. If they are, that's boring. Like, you know, it takes skill to have a consistent tone that like you want it to be funny in certain parts and you want it to be scary or action oriented in other parts. Like, the best movies are able to blend genres, right?
Oh, sure. I mean, like in life, like, you know, like there's like funny stuff that'll sometimes happen at a funeral, and then there's like funny stuff that happen or sad stuff that happens at a wedding. You know, it's not like one thing is always happy and one thing is always totally sad and somber. You know, things can change on a dime. And I think, if anything, I'm appreciative when Jordan Peele can kind of balance those two elements. I think he does here pretty well in certain key scenes.
Yeah.
But I know some people, I feel like when they see a comedic moment, they kind of get off put. I think the problem will be more for something like, say, Thor: Love and Thunder, where I think a lot of the more serious moments are undermined by the quippiness and stuff. But that's not to relitigate a conversation from a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that, like, if I was in, I put myself in the shoes of like the Haywoods. You know, if I was in that situation and I saw, you know, what they see, we'll get into what's seen later. But like, if I was in that situation, I probably would just say nope and walk away. You know, realistically, it wouldn't be. I think a lot of people mistake like the tone not being right to just like the tone just not being what they expected. You know, like I think a lot of people expected a pure like Close Encounters sci-fi horror kind of, oh my god, like Keke Palmer screaming at the screen like why like kind of dramatic.
Yeah, I think to boil it down even simpler, I think what tends to happen is people will watch something and they don't fully love it and they try to figure out why they didn't love it. And so they try to just come up with reasons, I think, sometimes. And I think they just like, you know, that scene did this thing, and I think the rules say that you shouldn't do that. So that's what the problem was. But I think sometimes you just watch something and you're not vibing with it. You're just not, and that's fine. But you're not, look, it takes multiple viewings sometimes to fully understand how you feel about a movie. That's all I'm saying.
I was going to say, though, I think one thing I really do love about like what Don's talking about, the way that the movie used the title Nope, is that it kind of gets into what I feel is like the sort of thrust of the film, which is that, you know, there's this kind of popular criticism with like, you know, haunted house films or something like Paranormal Activity, where people would just be like, why are they staying in the house? Why are they just not leaving? And all that stuff, which, you know, it's a funny, you know, complaint you can make, but also it's kind of like, well, then there's no movie, you know. It's just like, if they leave the house, then they just, you know, have a nice life, I guess. They're just like, they let it go. But I think this movie is kind of fascinating in that it's exploring the idea of like, why are we so compelled to these things that we know are bad or even dangerous for us? Like something that we know we don't want to look at, something that we feel we shouldn't look at, but we have this innate humane need to kind of explore something that's perverse or dark and bizarre. And I think that's something that Jordan Peele explores really well with this film.
We've done a really good job of talking about this movie without explaining anything about it in terms of the plot and this premise.
I mean, that's only fitting,
been
I
on
suppose.
purpose.
Yeah.
Well, that's been on purpose because I think that I did want to kind of get out there a little bit of a precursor and a little bit of, you know, as we ease in, because I am wary that like we don't want to spoil this for people. But obviously, if you're listening at this point, you know, like we're not going to spoil anything that happens. Like I'd say like past like the 30% mark in the beginning of the movie, right? So we're not going to talk about, and we won't be that detailed. We're going to preserve some things because there are things I don't want to talk about that I feel like people should watch for themselves, you know? But I do want to start getting into what we actually think of this one ourselves. We've been talking a lot about what other people think. Who cares? Let's talk about the boys. Okay, so the premise of Nope is as kind of, we all have been kind of alluding to some of the things that happened early on in this movie, but the basic gist is that there are a group of these horse trainers. They train horses for Hollywood productions. Like one scene, for example, they are kind of like managing this horse that's going to be in a commercial. They are the I think the Haywood twins, or not twins, but they're Haywood siblings. I think OJ is like the older one, right? I don't know if they've even established like who's the older or younger one. I don't know if it matters, but
Daniel Kaluuya is older than Keke Palmer, so I just assumed, you know, he's the eldest of the two.
I mean, it is. Well, here's the problem. It's a movie, so it could be whatever you. Anyway,
sure, I guess. Why not?
Daniel Kaluuya plays OJ, and yes, they do call attention to his name being OJ. He is the older or younger brother, who knows, to a character named Emerald, who is played by Keke Palmer. And they're kind of they're dealing with the fallout of their father, who's played by Keith David, and he passes away at the beginning of the movie. We won't really get into how, but essentially they are left this ranch and they're trying to keep the business alive. And some weird, creepy stuff has been going on in their ranch that is kind of like in this gulch outside of Los Angeles, speaking of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And some weird occurrences been happening in the sky. And they think that like if there is any sort of like, even if it's a hoax, some kind of allusion to a UFO and they get it on camera, that could be their ticket to selling it and perhaps making enough money to save the ranch. And, you know, win the big talent show before the mayor tears down the community center, all that good stuff. There are a lot of other people in this movie, but I don't want to like reveal too much. I mean, we do have Steven Yeun, who plays a former child actor who kind of sets up this like Western reenactment center that like borders the ranch. All kinds of hijinks going on with his character, who has been buying the horses from the Haywoods, and he wants to buy the whole ranch too. But they're like, no, we're going to save it. And so we also have Michael Wincott, who I did not know was in this movie. And I was very, very happy to see him, very surprised. But he plays this kind of, you know, dark and serious film director or cinematographer, I think, in this movie. And he wants to get like, you know, the perfect shot, right? We also have Brandon Perea as a tech salesman at Fry's Electronics. We used to have Fry's in the Bay Area. It's like a Best Buy, but, you know, not quite. It's like Best Buy, Circuit City, that kind of thing. I thought that they were all closed down. Like all the ones out here kind of closed down. There might still be a few here and there, maybe one in LA that they're referencing, but he plays a character named Angel who's trying to help the Haywoods set up cameras so they can get a shot of what has been lurking in the sky. The problem is their technology keeps shutting down whenever it comes around. So that's a basic setup of Nope. Let's talk about what we think, though. I'll say real quick, I've had a week to think about this movie. I saw it a little earlier, and I didn't know too much about like what other people were saying. I think I saw more mixed stuff coming out and a few negative reviews. And I remember mentioning that to Will, like as I was getting ready to watch this on IMAX. And Will was like, you know what? I'm seeing lots of positives, you know? So there seemed to be a little bit of like different timelines thing going on there.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I showed the receipts. Cool. Yeah,
yeah, I mean, Will was just like sending them up, blasting them all to my inbox. It's like, calm down. But I really enjoyed this film, and I've it's only gotten better in my estimation since. I kind of walked out at a little bit of like, what did I just watch? I kind of had to write about it to really get to the heart of what I think. And I'm very, very positive. I think that this movie is just one of those ones that hit me in the right ways, and it disturbed me in the right ways. It really messed me up. There are 2 scenes in this movie that have not escaped my psyche, but I want to hear what you guys have to say, starting with Mr. Will Ashton. Will Ashton, Willie Ash, the Ash Man himself, Will the Thrill.
I don't like any of these.
Will T.A.
Okay.
William Tyler.
Okay.
I have 12 more. Yeah, what did you think of Nope?
Well, you cut that out. Yeah, so what do I think of Nope? I think I already got into my thoughts a little bit already, but I'm definitely, as I mentioned before, in the positive camp for it, just because, as we've already mentioned, like, even though I'm pretty fresh, I guess, compared to you two, Don, like you said, you just saw it yesterday. John, you had a whole week to think about it. I'm coming in only a few hours from seeing it, but it is a film that, I had heard, I guess, a little bit more than you, John, going into this. I knew kind of the general ideas I was exploring, but there's obviously a lot of stuff I didn't know about going into this, or stuff that was alluded to that I didn't really understand until I saw the film. And then when I did see the film, it opened it up for me in a way that I really wasn't expecting. Because as we mentioned, I think part of the thrill going into the film is knowing that because Jordan Peele has the accessibility to play with such a big canvas and make a film that has, like, an original idea for UFOs and lets him make a movie with IMAX cameras and really explore the canvas of filmmaking in a way that feels very fresh and unique to him. It does offer a lot more as far as, like, okay, what is he going to do with this idea? And seeing the trailers and not really knowing much about what's going into the film, it's like, okay, this could really be about almost anything. And that, when you get a chance to actually see the film, you can read it a number of different ways. But for me, as I mentioned before, I feel like it is kind of this fascinating look at our need to kind of survey or explore trauma, or this innate desire to kind of look at the things that we feel compelled to not really, or whether it's something that we shouldn't look at, or something that, is so undeniably grandiose that we feel we have to look at it. It's something that is just innately very human. It can be perverse or can be dark, and it could be something beautiful. And it's also exploring the very nature of filmmaking, which gets into what we were talking about before. I feel like there are a lot of filmmakers to compare Jordan Peele to, but the one filmmaker, surprisingly, that I thought about a lot while watching this was Werner Herzog, because the film itself, as we were kind of alluding to, not only explores the very idea of, like, you have to kind of make film against the odds. Like, making films is sort of like capturing a miracle in a bottle. Like, it's this very idea that, like, no real sane person can really get into filmmaking in a way. Like, you kind of have to round about these sort of people that you may not even like, but you do feel compelled in the same exact way to do this very laborious, taxing thing, and it can be very exhausting. You may not actually produce something worthwhile, but when you do get those kind of magic moments, it can be such a beautiful and wondrous thing. But also the idea that, like, in doing so, especially when it comes to lower level employees, or in the sadder case with a lot of animals, there is this very innately tragic thing where, you can't really control wildlife. I mean, that's something with Werner Herzog. I feel like, certainly with Grizzly Man, like, there's this, like, innate power and humanity to, like, want to explore the wild and the unknown, and it can be very devastating and also very beautiful at the same time. But then also when you explore trauma, like he did in a film like Little Deer Needs to Fly, where you have, like, a guy who had this very traumatic incident early in his life that ultimately defined his life, but in a way that, obviously made it a lot harder, but it's the very thing that he's known for. And with Werner Herzog's film, it becomes this thing that he's, like, going to be known for forever and ever, but he has to kind of turn the darkest moments of his life into a kind of odd form of entertainment. And I feel like that is very reminiscent of Steven Yeun's character in this film, a character who I find to be, I think, the most compelling and fascinating character in the film, And if anything, I felt like I wanted to know more about him. I think there's a lot that we get, and I think he is the source of, I think, the most sort of fascinating and tragic moments in the film. And I feel like his performance really taps into that in a lot of compelling ways. But I think that also gets into a lot of things I like about the film is that it knows how to pull back its cards, not show everything all at once, but also give us enough of a taste to feel how fleshed out and intricate and kind of dark these characters can be at the same time. So yeah, a film I really have grown to like even in these few hours that I've gone from seeing it, and a film I imagine I'm going to like even more upon reflection, including this conversation.
What about you, Adonis? Because I know, we've had conversations, you and me, in the past, and we've agreed on things, we've disagreed on things, we've fought, we've bickered.
We've had our spats.
What about this time? Because you've kind of mentioned this movie it's kind of stuck with you, but in a good way or a bad way?
A tremendous way, honestly. I think I walked out probably pretty similarly to the both of you. I think I walked out going like, what did I just watch? Like, I think I had to really sit down and think about like what it is I just seen on screen. Because I mean, there's so much spectacle and so much like there's so many twists and turns and things you expect and then you don't get them and you get something else and you're like, oh, okay, so this is what we're getting. And I think like you were going back to what you were saying before, I think a lot of people, when they watch a movie like that and they see something and they're either like, well, I don't know if I liked that, or I don't know if I really understand that, or if I don't know if that's what I was expecting. Sometimes people will go like, oh, okay, it was bad. So I walked out of Nope thinking, well, I really enjoyed my experience, but I'm just left with so much I don't really know how I feel about it. And I was just like up like for 2 extra hours after that. I went to work in the morning and I was just thinking about it. And we were actually talking on Twitter and I saw that Logan Paul, shout out Logan Paul, tweet thread. And
friend of the show, right? I guess not, huh?
Former alumni of mine.
Yeah.
Oh, you went to the same...
he went to the same college of mine for one semester. I've been within a few feet of him before.
That's
never
crazy.
met him personally. I did meet Jake Paul.
That's good. I was going to say if it was Jake, he might have tried to fight you if you were that close. So I'm glad you weren't that close.
Yeah, you got to be more careful.
That's a story for another day. But Jake Paul was a different guy back then, I'll say.
Oh, I'm sure the Pauls were very different before. But yeah, going into that, I mean, I didn't connect the. There's so many layers to this movie. I mean, you can talk about it biblically, you can talk about it science fictionally, you can talk about it.
It opens with the Bible verse, right? Nahum.
Yeah.
One of the underrated books of the Bible. There should be more. Yeah, there should be more quotes.
The Bible needs more representation in media, I think. I mean,
I was just gonna say that, like the Old Testament, specifically the books around Malachi. That's if we're gonna recycle IP, there's some material.
The biblical cinematic universe can be crazy if we stick to Old Testament. That's when the gritty stuff was there. That's the DC Comics of the Bible.
Careful, Christopher Nolan listens to this show.
Oh, so. I'm sorry. Oppenheimer, by the way, great way to show off your movie that's coming out in like a year.
Haven't seen the trailer, so I don't know if I don't know.
You didn't get the oh, that's right. You saw it a little early, huh? There was a little Oppenheimer tease, like, hey, by the way, this movie is coming out. At least for mine. Oh, for yours too. Well, okay.
You better believe it.
More like Nopenheimer.
But yeah, going back to like Logan Paul, he really didn't have good things to say about the movie. He didn't like it. He thought it was boring. He thought it was too long and overdrawn. He thought none of the plot threads connected. And I remember looking at that and like making a joke about it with you and kind of realizing I never even connected the social media aspect of this movie. And then going back and looking at the scenes, obviously there's like very apparent scenes that very clearly reference like social media and like the need to like catch the moment and everything. But there's so much more throughout, like layered throughout the movie that kind of strengthens and like enforces that idea that I didn't really think about in that context until afterwards. So like, honestly, I think I'm the same as you, John. Like I just keep thinking about the movie and there's more layers that keep unraveling. And it's like, wow, I mean, Jordan Peele is like a genius. I don't want to toot his horn or anything. I don't, but like not that he needs me to do it, but like, wow, it's incredible how you can look at this movie and see all of these layers hours after watching it, days after watching, weeks after watching it.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that's one thing I do find really fascinating about the film is how it is one of the first major alien sci-fi blockbusters that we've gotten in the cell phone age, where we have immediate access to, like all these videos and information. We have like the power to record something on our phone. How do you directly combat that with a film like this? I think the film finds interesting avenues to get around that, but also to explore that thematically in pretty compelling ways. And I'd like to explore that a little bit later, but I don't want to trip over John's thoughts on the film this early on.
No, I mean, I want to highlight the Logan Paul thing for sure a little bit more. I mean, I cannot get over just the hilarious irony of the Logan Paul literally like a movie that basically is talking right to him.
Right.
Like, I'm not just saying to like the audience, I mean, literally people like him. And it would take us a while to kind of set it up and make our case for why, but it's literally a movie about like people kind of like building spectacle out of traumatizing things. Right. And not learning the right lessons from those experiences. And without getting into it, Logan Paul he's gotten in a few little snafus, a little bit, some issues where people have called him out for such things. And so it was just very hilarious for those of us on the internet too much to read him be like, this movie, it just doesn't come together for me. And we're like, dude, it's just too much. I gotta highlight that. There's this thread in the movie, and it was one of the main criticisms that he had. There is this image of a shoe that is just kind of like standing up, and it's very, very relevant to the themes of the movie, and it kind of showcases I think one of the things that works about the movie for me, and it's that a moment like that has an actual point to it. There's an explanation for why it's in the movie. And it's a good distillation of people who will look at that scene and be like, that doesn't make sense because I don't understand it. And then when you tell them, their reaction is like, oh, but I understood that. And then you're like, okay, well, here's how it's relevant to the plot. It actually ties to character motivation. And then it just kind of at that point seems to be like, well, I still didn't like it. And it's like, I get that. No one says you have to like this movie. But it's like I was saying before, I think this is just one of those movies where people are having trouble articulating what they don't like, which happens. And they're kind of looking at the things that Jordan Peele did that were unconventional and blaming it on those things, which I don't think that I haven't seen a lot of criticisms that are fair in that regard, but I will criticize the film for certain things. Maybe I'll fall into my own trap, who knows? But there are a couple things. I think that, Will, you kind of touched on this. I think weirdly enough, the sibling characters at times kind of get overshadowed a little bit by the Steven Yeun character, how he's written. I think that there's just a little bit of like some thin writing for those two. And there's a point in the movie where it needs to be strong because there's an emotional impact moment. And for me, I was a little bit of like, did I miss something here? Because I feel like I'm supposed to feel something grander and I don't. And so I just think that as much as I love both actors, there was something kind of missing for me there. There was like a scene missing or something. I
think I do agree with you in an indirect way, because I think your last point I do agree with, because they set up the characters really well. Like, I think there is something really compelling about how they are both interested indirectly and both directly with show business and the allure and the mystique of show business, but from two different angles, where we have OJ, a man who has a genuine love for animals and for, being with, these majestic creatures, caring for them, but he's, sort of jaded and indifferent to the whole business aspect of it. He's not really that charismatic innately. He's more introverted. And then we have Emerald, who is innately very, starry persona. She's very willing to kind of toot her own horn, celebrate the bombast of show business and get into it if she can, but she doesn't really care about this family business that they have. And I think there was more opportunity there to kind of show the push and pull of their personalities when they actually get into the UFO exploring, surveillance type angle of their story. And I felt like they they explored it fine because they have a kind of connection built, but by their mutual interests in finding this thing. But I think there was a little bit more avenue to explore that. And I am wondering if that's something that was maybe filmed, or some things that are shown that just didn't, get into the final film, or maybe is alluded to. Like, there is that one scene where, Emerald is kind of gradually kind of pouring her heart out to her brother, talking about how she felt like she kind of had to earn her father's affection in a way that OJ got it more naturally, in the way that I guess she was promised a horse and she never really got it because he was training OJ. And then, like, even then OJ doesn't really know how to articulate his feelings, or he doesn't really want to reflect on such a sad part of her life, so they kind of neglect that. And I think that's some things that I wanted to see the movie tackle a little bit more. I think that would have made the second half maybe a little bit more compelling. But
that's
I don't
what I'm
think,
kind of getting at.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. I think you're right, but I also don't find it to be quite a crutch that I think some other folks have.
Yeah, I think some people are taking that and being like, it ruins the movie for them, and maybe that's the case. It doesn't ruin the movie for me. I just think that it's something that I can point to for sure that I felt a little bit like lacking in. Like, I wanted a little bit more, and I'm happy with what I got, because one thing we haven't talked about with this movie as much is that just viscerally and just in terms of like the experience of watching it, especially the second half, which I think is extremely strong, is just, it's outright thrilling. It's blockbuster cinematic to me. Yeah. It had me, edge of my seat and all that good stuff. Not in a Top Gun Maverick kind of way, but definitely closer to it than something like Thor Love and Thunder or Doctor Strange or all these other blockbusters. Like, I barely felt tension in those movies. This movie, I was I wasn't just invested in terms of like a bigger, grander thing of like, I like Jordan Peele and that's about it. It was also like, I was sucked into this like standalone kind of story, which was nice.
Yeah, I think there's there's like a lot of in the second half. Once you kind of figure out what's going on, I think even after that, there's a lot of scenes where, like, even though we kind of know what it is and like what the big like reveal is near the end, even after that, there's like still so much more that Jordan Peele puts in the second half in terms of spectacle and like visual and audible sensations that just like I when I saw this in IMAX, like the noises, just the screams, like these screams in this movie are in like so well mixed.
Haunting.
Like, I can't remember the name of the guy, but they made a point to list the visual supervisor and the like the sound mixer at the beginning of the movie, because like they're very important parts of this movie, and they did such an incredible job. I mean,
see, actually, I do have one slight criticism though with the sound, not in terms of what you're talking about, but I did have trouble understanding what actors were saying at certain parts.
Oh, for sure.
Like, even though it was loud, like there were things where like I feel like I might be missing some important plot details because like characters were talking. I was like, wait, what did you just say? And some of the mixing I think could have been a little bit stronger. I am deaf, but I do wear hearing aids, and so we can't blame it 100%.
No, there's definitely a lot with especially Daniel Kaluuya. I think that his character, just by nature, is a very, and this is also something Logan Paul had an issue with. He said that like Kaluuya's character was boring and wasn't acting and everything. It's like,
now that to me was like when I was like, you just log off.
Yeah, come on, like,
you're literally saying like Daniel Kaluuya is like legitimately one of our top 10 actors working today. Like like unquestionably to me. And so to be just like, he's boring, and like you can't even find a better word than boring, then I think that you should not be talking.
Like, I think,
and I mean,
no,
go ahead. I was going to say, not to undermine an earlier point of mine, but there is a very sort of, by comparing him to another filmmaker, a very Eastwood kind of magnetic quality to him, where he has, he's very underspoken. Like, he doesn't really articulate his stuff well. He doesn't even feel like he can really articulate a lot of his stuff really well, but he has.
But he's not
just
quipping like Iron Man.
Sure.
So that means he's bad.
But he has that innate kind of charisma and that majestic sort of quality that I think is so hard to pull off as an actor. That, I mean, I found his performance to be pretty incredible for a number of reasons, but I thought that quality, and also just that it's a really funny performance. Like, I mean, I think that's something that kind of gets undersold. I mean, we talked about before, like, he sees, all these kind of wondrous things, or he doesn't, deliberately for different reasons. But yeah, like he'll be caught up in like such a wondrous and horrific moment, and he'll just like be like, nope, not gonna deal with that.
Right.
Just, nope. And which is, yeah. And the way he sells like those, every single nope, as the title suggests, I think was a credit to his acting, comedic timing. I thought they all got a hearty chuckle.
Oh yeah. There's like that one scene where he's in the car and he's continuously going nope. Like there's so much. In fact, in the whole movie, really, like there's so much he does with his facial expressions and his eyes. I mean, Kaluuya has always been incredible at acting with his eyes, but in this movie, I think Peele like definitely showcases that, because there's like so many moments where he's not saying anything, or maybe he said something, and like John, like there were a lot of moments where I didn't know what he was saying, but I kind of got the idea, because like he'll like look somewhere or like do something. I'm like, okay, at least I understand what his
could follow along.
Like at least it's like when you're in a conversation and someone says something, but like you were kind of checked out. But like you zero back in, like you're back into reality, and you're like, oh, okay. I mean,
yeah, Adonis, this happens with us with Spanish all the time. It's just like, my mom's Puerto Rican, her Spanish is like way too fast, and so like their time, like you swallowed that entire sentence, but I think I got it.
My dad will just speak to me in like full Honduran is a lot like Puerto Rican Spanish, because he'll just go incredibly fast. I'm like, Dad, you have to slow down, because I don't even know if what you said was a full cognitive sentence.
Yeah, this ain't YouTube. I can't slow down your playback speed.
Exactly.
Yeah. I got to admit, with Keke Palmer, I was going into this movie and I had seen a few takes, thanks to Will, where they were just like, you know what, this is Keke Palmer just like killing it, like, just blasting away. And like watching the movie, I was like, yeah, it's Keke Palmer, she's really good. But I wasn't, I was way more taken with Daniel Kaluuya, and I was thinking, she's solid, she's good, but like, is the other shoe gonna drop? The other shoe, because the shoe that stands it. And I was like, when's that gonna happen with her character? And when it does, that's when I was like, oh yeah, okay. Like she just kind of like overtakes the movie with her acting, and it's like out of nowhere almost. Not in a bad way, but just in a way of like I was definitely like hoping for it, and then it comes, and I was like, this is such a great cast overall for me, and to the point where like like with the Steven Yeun thing, I don't think we needed too much more of him. I'm kind of happy with what we got, honestly. I think if we had gotten a little bit more, it would have been a little too much, and I don't know. I don't want to say anything else on that. Maybe we will in just in a second when we'll set the stage for some spoiler talk.
Yeah, I guess maybe my complaint with Steven Yeun's character is just that maybe I wanted more direct interaction with the main characters. It just kind of seemed like, I mean, I think thematically, I think he really ties the film together. But I in terms of narrative, I feel like he's kind of often on the side, which is fine.
I have a very spoilery thing I want to talk about, actually, in that. A suggestion I wonder could have helped. And I know what you're saying. Don't backseat drive Jordan Peele, John. Sure. Who do you think you are? A fool, for one thing. But any last non-spoiler thoughts before we play the Rotten Tomatoes game?
Non-spoilery thought. I guess I would say this is one of those very few times where even watching the trailer, I'd say I think you're pretty safe going into this movie. Like, I think I only saw like the first two, if there were more than that, but I think I don't think they give anything away, if I'm being honest.
The final trailer gives away a decent bit. If you can't avoid the final trailer, I would say avoid it.
It's usually the final trailer. That's the one where the studio's just like, you know what, whatever, just give them what.
Yeah, if you're still not convinced,
here's the movie, right?
Usually, my rule of thumb is like, if you're going to watch a trailer, usually the best bet is either the first teaser, or if you really want to risk it, the first trailer. But yeah, once you get into like official trailer 2 or TV spot teaser, you run a little bit more of a risk. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, general thoughts. I just wanted to kind of say that, I mean, as we were talking about before, there's so much to explore as far as like, I think thematically it's really compelling and all that. I think the one thing I just wanted to really highlight is just how much I appreciate this movie on, as we mentioned, sort of a cinematic level. It did remind me, like thinking back earlier this year, like I feel like this is giving me the highs that I'd gotten from Northman which is, also Robert Eggers' third film. But there is this weird thing with the film where it is kind of reminiscent of Steven Spielberg's third film was Close Encounters. And even though Signs wasn't Shyamalan's third film, I think it was actually his fifth, people treat it as his third film because people act like Sixth Sense was his directorial debut. And there is this interesting thing where, all these prominent filmmakers use their third film to explore aliens, but also just the humanity they're in, certainly with Richard Dreyfuss's character in Close Encounters, kind of him going mad with obsession with it. And then also, with Signs, the in-house, having this sort of, very grand cinematic thing, with the weeds or the cornfields. But, most of the main action happens in the house. And I think those are two qualities in this film as well. But as we mentioned before, I just think it's still very true to Jordan Peele that he only continues to grow and have such a distinct style, both as a writer and as a director. And seeing that continue to grow and flourish is something that I find so satisfying and so compelling from him as a filmmaker. I think, he's only continuing to evolve in that respect. Even if I don't think his films are always getting better and better, I think he continues to get better and better as a filmmaker. And that's something that I find so enthralling and so interesting as he continues to get bigger budgets. I think this was 70 million or something like that. I find that to be very exciting at a time where IP is driving the market.
Yeah, I agree. And we didn't mention, but Hoyt van Hoytema is the cinematographer, and what they're able to make with this, the practical effects and the mix of the actual computer generated effects too, is pretty seamless. There's a reason people are comparing this so liberally to Spielberg. It really does have that quality to it, that kind of throwback thing, where we have the tech to show off impressive big things that you can't, that actually feel magical to see on screen. The last thing for me is I think that this is impressive on almost every level. I think there are just a few flaws here and there. It's I don't think it's a masterwork necessarily. I think one of the things that holds it back is I think the sibling dynamic isn't that great. And I do wonder if part of that is because Peele, he was an only child, right? Or not an only child, but I don't think he had a sister. He might have had brothers, but I just don't think he nails a screenwriter what it's that sibling relationship as well, even though the characters themselves work really well. But certainly there are people who are going to disagree. With that, though, let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. So the way the Rotten Tomatoes game works is Will and Adonis are going to guess the Rotten Tomatoes score. And I have a feeling they both have seen the Rotten Tomatoes score at some point. Is that the case, boys?
I feel like I looked it up, but I genuinely, honestly don't remember what it was. So
yeah.
I know the cinema score was. So
Will knows that too.
Yeah, we can just kind of get cinema score out of the way first, I guess, since we both know it.
Wait, I don't know what it is.
Oh, you don't?
I didn't look it up.
Okay, then let's let John guess it.
Yeah, I get to join in on the fun once in a while.
So, John, you take a guess. What is the cinema score for Nope?
I'm gonna say B+.
Okay. It's a little bit lower, I believe. Isn't it B flat?
I think it's I think it's a flat B.
Yeah. So low for.
Okay.
For
I was thinking
movie.
B.
Yeah.
But I was a little bit because I think Us was a B, wasn't it?
Was it? I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure Get Out was an A or an A+. So.
Oh yeah, I mean it's his biggest crowd pleaser, and I think that it's an easier film to walk out of and be like, I got it, because there weren't as many layers and metaphors, right?
Right.
I mean, it is fascinating because that's a script that he worked on, I think, for literally a decade. I think he first started writing that in 2008. Right. So that's a script he honed. And so that's an airtight script. Even though he changed the ending for the better, I guess. But
Us was a B.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, I find that more interesting that he's using that platform to make more sprawling and ambitious and ultimately indulgent and messy films. I think in a good way for those latter two words. But I can see why general audiences can be kind of put off by that. Though I do find it fascinating that this film is kind of getting a somewhat divisive response, considering that has more of a crowd-pleasing feel to it. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree with that.
I agree completely, actually. But okay, let's see if you'll get the Rotten Tomatoes score, because it might be different from when you checked it last. But definitely, let me know if you remember or have a guess based on that. So we'll start with Will, because I feel like it's been a while since you saw the Rotten Tomatoes score, hasn't it?
I think I saw a Variety article from Friday or something where they spoiled it.
Well, go ahead. It might be different.
I mean, the score then was, I believe, 89%. But I want to go a little bit lower. I'm going to guess 85%, just because I feel like people are a little bit down on this film. Not on my timeline, as we established, but just in general. Seems like people like the film, but they have some reservations, or they're kind of coming out of this being like, I don't know, I'm not quite vibing with this film. So 85 seems right in my heart.
All right, so 85 is Will's guess. And I forgot to mention, that's 251 reviews counted so far. What about you, Adonis?
I'm actually going to be pretty close to Will's. I'm going to guess 87%.
Will wins this round because guess what, guys? It's 82.
Oh.
That's way lower than 89. Yeah, I lowered quite a bit. And yeah, I've read a few negative reviews. I haven't really found any of them yet. Like, yeah, I found them good and everything. I found some good ones where I'm like, okay, that's interesting criticism. But I haven't found any where I'm just like, really like, wow, you know, I didn't even think about that, or like, you know, I've definitely been enjoying the positive reviews so far more. I've been finding them very fun to read. But okay, what about audience score? Audience score is always an interesting one, isn't it? We have 2,500 verified ratings, or 2,500 plus. Adonis, you get to start this time. What do you think the audience score is?
Okay, I'm gonna guess it's somewhere. I'm gonna guess it's like not too far off from the critic score. I'm gonna guess like 79. I'm gonna go like a 79%.
Okay, Adonis guessed 79% for the audience score. What about our buddy Will?
I was thinking 76.
Will wins yet again because it's 70.
What?
Yeah, it's a bit lower, isn't it? So an 82-70 split, which is pretty, you know, audiences are taking one look at this movie and they're saying, no, thank you. Okay, so
I think they're going more like meh than no thank you, but I get your point.
It's like a polite, you know, meh. Okay.
Well,
That could be because, I mean, I tried to get a lot of people to go see this with me, and I think 10 out of the 11 I asked were like, no, it looks too scary. So maybe audiences are just like, you know.
And then you responded, you look too scary, and it created all this drama.
Then I lost 10 friends, you know.
Yeah, sitcom laugh. Then the violence happened.
Oh, no. Okay, Letterboxd. We have 90,000 people have logged this on Letterboxd. That's not a lot for a movie that I thought would probably be in the hundreds of thousands by now. But yeah, it's not low or anything. I mean, sometimes we're looking at these and they're like 10, 20,000. But yeah, 90 for a big budget blockbuster summer movie, kind of, I don't know. But what do we think the average Letterboxd rating is? Starting with you, Will Ash and Willie Ash.
4.4.
Will guesses 4.4. Adonis G.
I'm going to go for a clean 4.0.
And I like to think in my heart, Adonis won the whole game because he got that spot on.
There's no way.
And it's a clean 4, which I'm surprised you guessed so high, Mr. Will. I know you have been like, you've been telling me it's like my letterbox is like raves up and down, but I've been telling you, Will, that it's not been for me.
Well,
4 is actually pretty high too.
I thought, I thought you had the outliner timeline. You know, I thought more people would be like me, my timeline, and being like rave.
Rookie mistake.
Yeah, pretty good rave.
The opposite is usually true, isn't it?
Yeah. So.
Oh man. All right. Well, that is our spoiler-free section for Nope. From this point on, we're going to talk about this movie in a little bit more detail. Maybe get into a little bit more specifics around what we liked or disliked toward the ending of this movie, starting now. So you have been warned. I said in my review of this movie that I think that, you know, this is a movie that will, make some people hate how much they love movies, because it really is kind of turning the camera on audiences themselves. And so I've been kind of expecting people to be a little bit like uncomfortable with the message in this movie. But I can see a lot of people being like, this is the message we need right now. And the message being, you know, we will do anything, like, you know, the public, the sort of Hollywood machine has this insatiable hunger for, you know, monetizing bad stuff, you know, taking something very traumatizing and making a movie out of it. And that, of course, ties in with the whole Gordy thing. And I love how that gets woven into this. I've seen a lot of criticisms that have said, like, when we go to the Gordy thing twice, it starts the movie, and then in the middle of the movie we have the extended version of it, and it's like, I don't understand why, it feels out of place, or like this doesn't tie to, and then I've seen people be like, I get what it means thematically. I get that Peele is saying, that this is the tragic flaw of the Stephen Yeun character, and they get that it connects to the message of the movie. But I think people are just sort of being like, it's not functionally working for them. But I don't agree. I think it's great. I think there have been movies that have twisted the rules on this a bit and have done this. Tarantino has done tangents like this a lot in his movies. And I think that I was going to bring up Tarantino in this section. I didn't want to bring up too early, but because we did reference Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But I think the way that he does that with his kind of like sprawling movies is so reminiscent of like what Peele is kind of doing here too, where it doesn't just lend to the message, it doesn't just explain character motivation, it also just like is extra atmosphere. And that scene is just, I can just tell that he probably was told by a few people to make it shorter, and he was just like, nah, I'm making him watch the whole dang thing. And the two scenes I referenced before, and I want to get y'all's read, but this scene and the digestion stuff, where, it's basically like a roller coaster scream factory, and you see them being digested. I cannot believe that this movie exists in that fashion, that this was released and that I watched that, because like I was so deeply disturbed by it. I just don't get that from movies very often. Something like Crimes of the Future, that's kind of what I was expecting from that movie, and I didn't get it like I got with this movie. Go ahead, Will. Tell me why you hate that comment.
Crimes of the Future, good movie too. But anyway, no, I mean,
Adonis likes it, so I'm surrounded.
Yeah, Adonis, you wrote the write-up for it on the best of the year so far list, right, for young folks, if I'm not mistaken?
I did. John and I never actually talked about it, but I do know that I did like it a little more than he did. I liked it a little more than most people did, but I think that probably connects to the fact that
kindred spirits. I
think it's just also the fact that I'm not really like a huge Cronenberg fan. Like I wasn't really. I don't think I've seen much of his stuff, and if I have, it's only been recently. So I think that like a lot of people are like, oh, I get it. It's just Cronenberg being Cronenberg. And for me, that was just like, not to go off too much into a tangent about it, but for me, Crimes of the Future was just like my first time seeing Cronenberg go full Cronenberg in my timeline. So,
but to tie it back to Nope, I was just gonna say, yeah, I mean, I just don't. I think the movie could work without Stephen Yeun's character and without the Gordy stuff, but I don't think it works as well without it. And I mean,
agreed.
I think all that stuff with Stephen Yeun's character and with Gordy, I think is the stuff that I've been thinking about so much since I've seen it. A.A. Dowd had a great piece about it in The Ringer, but I mean, I just want to say, like, I think to your point, there were like two moments in the film that I just have been reflecting upon a lot. Certainly the Gordy scenes earlier, but I think more than the digestion scene that you're referring to, John, I think that shot of Stephen Yeun, like looking up at the sky as the alien's sucking everything up, and you just see the people floating up in the sky, like their shadows, and he's just like so caught up in the wonder of it that he's not really processing the trauma of like in the terror of like what's happening. I think that's the shot for me that I think about a lot upon reflection of this film, just because it sums up the tragedy of this character who is just, so innately tied to this horrific thing that happened to him. And, child actors in general just have this connection to, Hollywood, where they have to kind of grow up too fast or they get caught in these, terrible moments. I was just reading last week that Sarah Polley was talking about her experiences working on, what's that Terry Gilliam movie? Baron Munchausen or something. You know which one I'm talking about?
Adventures of Baron Munchausen?
Munchausen, yeah, which is a film I haven't seen.
I think that's what it is.
But it's part of her book, but like there's a piece about it in The Guardian, terrific article just talking about like how, like it's like, yeah, it's a great film, and I don't dismiss the experience of it, but it's like, is it really worth all this trauma that I had to endure, working on this chaotic set, dealing with all this? And I was thinking about that a lot watching this film, and how like, with Stephen Yeun's character, he has to kind of process everything through the business of show business, where like, you know, like not only did this horrific thing happen to him and he survived, with a, you know, an actor, you know, in this case a chimp who he had this connection with, you know, as seen with the palm thing, but you know, he has to also process it through, you know, comedy, and, you know, like SNL sketches and like all these different things where innately people use
horror. Anytime somebody trying
Right.
to explain an SNL sketch to you,
right? Yeah, no, well, yeah, that too. But also just like the idea, I think someone tweeted that, but yeah, just the idea
Did
that
they really?
like, yeah, I saw someone tweet that, and at the time I didn't understand it, but now I do.
Was it Chris Kattan?
No, I wish. But I would love to see his review of the film. But yeah, just the idea that like people have to innately kind of process these things through comedy in a way that I feel like Jordan Peele is critical of, but also just recognizing as someone who comes from sketch comedy that like so many horrific, terrible things happen that like as a society, we kind of have to use either comedy or horror to process these things, you know, because that's the way
he's doing it with horror, right? Because the
Right.
Travis the Chimp thing, he's like clearly referencing like not just him like bringing up the Gordy situation, because that similar thing happened with a chimp that went
Travis
wild. And
the chimp, I think, was I don't know if it's directly related to that, but there was like a woman who got like horrifically mauled.
yeah, so that's what I was about to say. Like literally, they call out Oprah in this movie, right? And
Right.
Oprah made this big spectacle of like showing a maimed woman as the victim of the Travis the chimpanzee. I believe it was the same. And like
Yeah.
they literally do that in this movie where he,
Mm-hmm.
you know, brings in, you know, and calls attention to
Yeah.
his co-host, who like at that point we didn't even know who survived,
Co-star.
right? Like
Yeah.
his co-star on the show, who like it's kind of implied that like he's the only survivor, but she survived as well, but was horrifically, you know, maimed, and she shows up, and it's like I felt so bad for her in this because like
Right.
then she, because of him, like the vicious cycle continues, and she ends up, you know, this horrible grisly fate. Also, what was she doing there? She should not have come around.
I don't know.
But I
I
guess
mean,
that-
but, yeah, but I was gonna say if you actually look at like the clips from Charla Nash on Oprah, I think she's wearing the exact same outfit that she is wearing in the
Really?
audience there.
Huh.
So you know, yeah.
Interesting.
It's pretty messed up. Pretty messed up. What do you, and Adonis, I think we gave you a chance to really sit on those scenes.
I was actually jumping off from Will, the Stephen Yin thing. That scene in particular, and the very first scene of the movie, I think kind of like echo in my head just over and over again, because I mean, there's that scene where like Gordy is like, this is before we realize who he's looking at, and we assume he's looking at us, right? Where he kind of just stops, takes his hat off, and just stares right at you, right?
Sorry, I don't know that one.
Oh, I guess something I said sounded like, you know who. I won't say it again, but she's listening in. Yeah, but there's like that moment where he looks at us, and I guess that's Jordan Peele saying, you know, obviously, you know, like the audience, you're a part of this too. So that really resonated with me. But it's also just like the idea of Gordy and Stephen Yin's character. I don't think the movie would have been as strong if Peele had cut any of that out, because I think that, I mean, yes, it is a very it's taking a metaphor and turning it into a subplot for sure, but that's something that like Peele hasn't done like in this manner before, but like it's something that he's definitely referenced. Like in Get Out and Us, there are moments and like there's pieces of dialogue that you think don't really matter much, but then like later on it turns out they did. This one was more like a scene, like an entire scene that may not have made much sense at first, but then you realize at the end, oh, you know, like the Gordy's home incident definitely connects directly to the rest of this film, to Stephen Yin's tragic fate. And that's why I was saying earlier, like I feel like maybe it's just like my projection as an audience member. I don't know if Peele wanted us to see Ian's character as like an antagonist, even though he's kind of like not necessarily against like the Haywoods, but like he's very much like a force they have to kind of like be aware of, you know, with their park and everything. But for me, he was just kind of like a tragic, just another tragic protagonist. You know, I think he was just like an example of taking, because for me, the biggest, among all the layers in this movie, the biggest one that like really stuck with me is like, life is what you make it. You know, like miracles are, they can be good and they can be bad, you know. And I think throughout this entire movie, we see a ton of good and bad miracles. You know, like Stephen Yeun's survival can be seen as a miracle, quote unquote, but at the same time, it deeply affected him. He saw a chimpanzee massacre right in front of him, and he took that and kind of, you can see it and say, like, he took it and became a stronger person, and like didn't let it control him, and he's kind of trying to take control over. But also, you look at the way it ends up and compare that to Daniel Kaluuya's character, who kind of is going through a similar thing. A very traumatic, bad miracle happened to him and his family. And he's also kind of taking control of it, but it's not so much like he says it somewhere in the movie, and I don't remember exactly how he phrases it, but he's like, you can't really tame a wild animal. You have to come into an agreement with it, And I think the whole scene with like the fist bump later on in the movie with Gordy and Yin is kind of like reminiscent of that, because that was kind of like an agreement that he didn't really realize was an agreement. He took that as like, oh, okay, this animal trusts me. I'm a trustworthy kind of person. This must mean
I'm special.
Exactly. I'm a special kind of person. And so for me, that was like such a tragic. That's kind of why I think I and like us, like so many people resonate so much with Stephen Yeun's characters, because like he is kind of another reflection of the audience. I think given if we were to go through the same sort of thing, it'd probably end up the same way. I don't think that the Haywoods are necessarily characters you can't really connect to in that sort of way, but I think that and again, I don't want to put like words in his mouth, but I think that Peele was like trying to say like, okay, these are the characters, these are our heroes, but Stephen Yeun's character was kind of a little more realistic to me. Like his whole journey, his arc, it just like made a lot more sense. So, but I kind of agree with you, John. I don't think we needed much more. I would have liked to have seen like them interacting a little bit more, but I think that his arc was pretty cut and dry, very good, like from start to finish. I think that it was really necessary. So I don't really like, I see why people look at it and say like, oh, it wasn't necessary. Oh, I don't quite understand it. But I also kind of don't see that after watching the entire movie, because I think that Peele did a really good job of wrapping up the themes, like the connections between Gordy's home and like the UFO debacle, like pretty well, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I kind of pushed back against, I forget if it was you or John said he might be a secondary antagonist, because
That was me for sure.
I mean, yeah, he is. Okay. Because, yeah, I mean, he is like buying the horses, and he, offers to buy the ranch, but he's not like a, nefarious businessman. He's not like doing it
he's
under
dressed
false...
like the mayor from Jaws for a reason, guys.
Well, sure, yeah.
Right.
But I mean, he does have this like, chintzy theme park, whatever, and it is kind of garish in its way. But, I mean, it's not like what he's doing is directly bad until we get to obviously the moment where, he makes such a, horrendously fatal mistake.
Well, there is animal cruelty, right? He's feeding horses to.
Well, fair enough. Yeah,
he's endangering these people. He's knowingly like luring in an unpredictable and primal creature, a wild animal, in order to like make money, right?
But as Donis was saying, I think I find him more to be just an inherently tragic character, more than I find him to be nearly a secondary antagonist. I just see him as like someone who just innately is so flawed and so marred by this horrible experience that, I just find him to be a very fascinating character. And I think Stephen Yeun portrays that complexity in very interesting ways, even down to the point of, making a soliloquy about Chris Kattan's performance as a chimpanzee one of the most dramatically devastating moments of a film. I mean, only a great actor, I think, can truly do that.
Okay.
One of the things I really like, too, is that it's a movie with predominantly people of color. Stephen Yeun being Asian, 2 black actors. I think Angel, he appears to be like maybe Filipino, or I don't actually know what his ethnicity is, but like, certainly like, a darker skin. But like, I think that's kind of the idea they're getting around. Like, I think like the one sort of like white major character we have is the cinematographer, who, I think is, kind of fitting considering his whole deal and how he essentially like, in his journey for like the perfect shot. And I've seen a lot of criticisms about his character and his motivation, what he's doing. To me, it very much is like on the nose, almost to a fault, but I like it. I like Jordan Peele kind of being like, here is this this director who's so obsessed with analog, who's so obsessed, who's a bit of a Nolan type, that he's literally going to put himself literally criticizing the Hollywood movie machine and that sort of over obsession with everything being practical, everything being analog, right? It's well, we have to do it this way, and then this attitude of it's the only way to make a movie. It has to not just be, it has to be shot on film. You can't have art otherwise. And I think that's so on the nose, but in a very good way. I have so much more to say, but I feel Will, you gotta step in, don't you?
Well, no, I mean, that character, that really gets into, as you were discussing before, the whole idea of spectacle, the idea that we have often seen so many filmmakers feel this drawn need to be I want to make film. In this case, he has, seemingly good purposes as far as he's using his film to make documentary footage about animals, not in malicious way, but kind of more to document their lives and just kind of preserve them for film history.
Well, you can tell how desensitized he is too, right? Watching animals kill each other, and he's just whatever.
Right. But yeah, he gets we can discuss it, I guess, because of spoilers, but yeah, he gets, not the best footage in the world.
Spoilers.
Yeah, sure. But he gets the footage of the alien. It's great. It's a triumphant moment. They finally got it. It's on film, so you don't have to worry about it, going kaput with the electricity. But he sees the sun in the sky, and it's that twilight hour, and he gets that Terrence Malick influence where he's I got to do it now. It's the perfect time, the perfect lighting. He has a chance to do the impossible shot. It might take him, out with him. He seems to know that it's going to take him out, but he just feels a strong need. And we see the footage a little bit, but it's he doesn't even get it really. And, that's just, kind of compelling to his character is that he feels, this just innate need to kind of do the impossible. And that's filmmaking in a nutshell, but also, makes for
it's not just filmmaking, it's Hollywood.
Sure.
I think that's what Peele is getting at. And I think it's why I resonate with the movie so much. I've talked about this a bunch.
Show business, baby.
I think there is such a profound dark side to Hollywood that I think Jordan Peele is eviscerating here. That, you can feel it when you go to LA. I know that, Will, you spent limited amount of time in LA. Adonis, I think you've been there more than once, right?
Mm-hmm.
No more parties in LA.
Well, the thing is, I've talked to people about why I live in the Bay Area versus LA when I had a chance to live in LA, and I have just never vibed with it. There is just there's this sweaty energy. There's this sort of that callousness that Steven Yeun's character has from child star to adult actor is very, very common. It's very, very there's this lack of emotion. There's this there's a certain critic that Will and I sometimes joke about. We won't say his name, but Will, you literally sent me a tweet where he was remarking on the death of a famous person, and it was just so tone deaf. But it was just if you're in LA for 10 minutes, it's it's a very common thing. And I'm not trying to go hard against people who live there, obviously, and there's so many exceptions, it's too many to count, but it's certainly a culture, it's a culture of prioritizing it, putting stuff on film and making money off of it. No story is off the table. And I think Peele has made a movie that is very much about that. Mm-hmm. And I love it a lot because it's something that needs to be said.
I do got to push back a little bit on that, though, because I do think while it is very critical of it and satirical of it, it's not like the Beta Test, the film we discussed, I think last year, the year before, where it's just this is a very seedy, ugly place that kind of brings out these, terrible...
it's smarter than that.
Sure. I like that movie fine. But I think this movie... It's both. It's it is condemning it. It is satirizing it. It's mourning it in some respects, but it's also celebrating film. If it was just completely condemning film, I feel it would be also a lesser film.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's completely. I think it's not completely condemning it because our main characters who we root for are doing the same thing, right?
Right. Well, that's what I mean.
They are doing it for the right. Yeah, they're doing it to save their ranch. Their motivations are in the right place, but there's a sociopathy to what other characters are trying to do that he highlights.
But I think it's intentional, though. This movie doesn't take place in Los Angeles. It takes place several miles outside of it, close to it, but not directly in Los Angeles. I think if it was there, then it would have been too poignant in that respect. I think by making it, out closer into like the ranch area and then like out in the west, you are able to kind of see the luster of it and kind of celebrate the like cinematic aspects of the story. And I mean, not only it makes it appealing to watch, but it also recognizes that like, yeah, it's understandable why they're getting caught up in wanting to do this thing that is, very hectic and very dangerous. Even for Stephen Young's characters, Ricky, like as tragic and as dark and as brutal as the story can be, you can understand his show business desire to kind of bring some sense this tragic incident, something you can't really verbalize. I think it's both. I think that's what makes the movie so compelling, is that it can recognize the beauty of film and making film, especially from an indie standpoint, and recognizing the small guys on it, the crew members, the animal wranglers, but also recognizing that it is a terrible, horrible business,
tech salesman.
Yeah. Well, there's
and also recognizing that it's terrible too at the same time.
Well, I was gonna say, I think that that's a really good point you bring up, Will, because I think that the whole metaphor of like, well, not metaphor, but the fact that the Haywoods are like horse trainers, like they're the small guys, and like you have Angel as like the camera guy, the tech whiz. I think that also goes back into John's point of like this being a movie with a primarily person of color cast, because even as like Keke Palmer's character mentions, their grandfather was the person on the horse in the very first like great grandfather. Yeah, they're great. There's another great. He was actually on camera. He was the first black man on a horse, but nobody knows his name. They just know the name of the guy who directed it. And I think a lot of that connects to. I think the whole movie connects really to like the good and the bad of Hollywood. Hollywood itself being like a miracle, like a place of miracles, but like people see the word miracle and instantly think, oh, okay, it's got to be all good. It's got to be all OJ and Emerald Haywoods walking around. But no, you do have your Stephen Yins, and you have your, I don't remember the name of the director, but you have your auteurs who are like walking around going, I have to find the perfect shot. And like, if you didn't watch Citizen Kane 5 times this week, then you're not a real filmmaker, and I really love his character, because like, I feel like that's Peele kind of poking fun at like what people assume he's like as a director, just because of like this
it's also referential because his name is Antlers, which I think is a reference to like the deer from Get Out. There's also the scissors, right, in From Us that shows up in the scene. There's a bunch of
so like
Easter
he's definitely
eggs.
supposed to be like a projection of Peele, which goes back into like which is just like him kind of like poking fun at himself and poking fun at like the seedy side of Hollywood, but also acknowledging like, there's good and bad sides to everything. There are still people in Hollywood trying to do the same things, but for the right reasons, because like the Haywoods and Stephen Yin's character are still ultimately trying to do the same. Everyone really in the movie is trying to do the same thing. They're all trying to be a part of that moment, but they're all doing it for like different reasons. Like they have different motives. And I think it's really cool that it is like sort of on this like ranch, this like open deserted area, because it's kind of a metaphor for like, hey,
well, you feel like they're making a movie.
Exactly.
And I think that's the idea, right? It's not just the Jaws thing. It's also because it does feel like Jaws. It's like a heist to capture get a picture of the creature.
Yeah.
But it's also combining with other movies. What?
I just said, especially at the end, the end is very,
especially. And like everybody has their roles, right? Like Keke Palmer's she's kind of the producer. OJ is kind of like, he's a producer, but he's also like a stunt man. You have the cinematographer, obviously. You have, the kind of tech guy. You can argue who's the director, but like, it even comes down to the TMZ dude, right? Who comes in, who I had to make a note of this when I saw it in the credits. They named him Ryder Muybridge, which is a reference to what the horse film you were talking about, Adonis, which the movie starts with the horse in motion, the first motion picture on the
not even
podcast.
The man on the horse, the horse,
not even the man on the horse,
right.
But the director of that was Edward Muybridge, and so there's even that sense of just like that person kind of butting in and trying to like basically capitalize on their work on like what they're doing. So like. Peele knows what he's doing. He peels back the layers.
I think also like Yeah, no. Going way back to like the Logan Paul thing. Another issue he had with it was like, or not really. He missed this point entirely. Was like the criticisms about like social media and like how fast paced fame is these days. How everyone's always kind of like trying to be in the moment and like catch, not so much like discover the next big thing, but just like be a part of it and be like, oh, I was there. I took the first picture of the next big thing. So like, here's my claim to fame. But I mean, I think it's cool that while he does acknowledge that aspect of it, he's not afraid to like poke fun at himself. He's not afraid even to poke fun at the Haywoods, like, yeah, sure. They're going at it for like really honorable reasons. They want to save their ranch, but they're also like putting themselves in serious danger, like definitely putting themselves in risk just to be a part of this moment. So I think that like a lot of the people who are like, oh, this movie's just poking fun at like social media influencers. No, I think that Peele is poking fun at like the entire concept of Hollywood and fame and like being a part of like the next big thing. We're all trying to do it, but I think there's a lot of commentary to have on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, even though the movie's not directly about like stunt people, I feel like that's such a plight of like the stunt person, another person that doesn't get recognized. Like often, like they don't get awards or anything usually. I mean, I think there might be awards designated for stunt people, like an own stunt person award. I might be wrong about that, but like, I mean, that's something, tying back to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that film explores more directly. But this film, kind of gets the heart of that, where it's just like, there are a lot of people who just do this because, they feel compelled to, and they're not going to get the notoriety or fame or even recognition for it. And the film they make or don't even get to make may not even be worth the while, but they still feel that innate desire to explore. And I think this movie celebrates that as much as it kind of mourns that, feverish desire that we often have in art as well as filmmaking to, kind of explore the impossible, even when it might be to our detriment. So, yeah.
If there's any bad miracle, it's the fact that there are any films. Personally, I think that Jordan Peele is on the trajectory to become like one of our premier directors at this point. Already is. And I think that, like, for example, like Universal, they're very lucky they have this guy because I think that he is like, really just like elevating their game in terms of putting out movies that I think like are original, that do have all of these layers. But they can kind of have their cake and eat it too, huh? They can monetize this, right? Do you think we're ever going to go to Universal Studios and there's going to be like a Jordan Peele part of the park where it's like there's a ride where you go through the gulch and you get noped?
Did you stay for the end credits?
Yes.
Did you see at the end?
I didn't. Is there
at the end
end credit scene? Oh, come on.
Well, no. There's not an end credit scene, but there's a promotional for, it says, come down Jupiter's Landing or whatever the place is.
It's just a still.
Yeah.
And I think it's like all red, right? Because like the credits up to that point, it starts orange and then it becomes red. And then it's like the promotion thing.
Yeah.
It just kind of ends with like, yeah.
I mean, it just highlights kind of the irony of it. You still kind of like go to this place that led to 40 people's horrific death. Yeah, it's just like they're still, I mean,
people still go to Disneyland
because there is the Jaws exhibit. Yeah, and I mean, there's the Jaws exhibit at Universal. I mean, one of their most
there was a Jaws ride for the longest time,
right?
And I think there is still a Jaws ride in one of the other in the Universal parks overseas. I want to say, yeah, great movie. Certainly one I'm going to be thinking about for a long time, and certainly one that I think will probably be. It's probably going to be one of those Jordan Peele movies that people will be like, hot take time. I think Nope is his best movie. And you could probably say that people could do that for all of his movies, except for Get Out, maybe. Who knows how that'll shake out. But I'm always excited to hear when he's working on something new. This was certainly not an exception. Before we go, anything else? I mean, there's tons of stuff we didn't even get to. There's the whole, like, the alien dumping on the house, like Poltergeist. That was... I love that so much.
That's actually... I'm glad you mentioned that. I wanted to say... Earlier we were talking about antagonists, and it dawned on me. I don't think there's actually that's not true. There's definitely an antagonist in this movie in terms of like, a giant alien space creature that's gonna like.
But it's just nature, right?
Right, exactly.
And
I think that was a really cool.
Like, I like to think, I thought it was kind of like a stingray at first. And I was like, oh, it's like an animal. But like then it just becomes bed sheets, and
it becomes like the biblical representation of like an angel.
Yeah.
At the end there, like the big eye thing.
It was straight out of like Digimon, Anjumon,
Yeah.
when he gets into ultimate form. You're right.
Oh, did we
like
talk about all like the anime references and stuff in this movie? Like
there's an Akira reference
Akira,
that is like
oh yeah
blink and you won't
God,
miss
so
it.
cool.
I mean, it's pretty.
I mean, but there's also like I forget. There's like some hoodie or shirt that Keke Palmer's character wears. There's like a few.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, her and Daniel Cole are like fitted up in references with their shirts for sure.
Yeah, loved the Scorpion King production hoodie. I thought that was great.
perfect choice. Like the perfect movie. It just
some
nothing else would have worked.
Yeah, that was such a great line too. It's just like, yeah, you guys were filming some Western. He's like Scorpion King.
Scorpion King wasn't even Western.
But I also liked how like the creature's like mouth was kind of like a camera lens. That was like a really cool touch, It was just like, oh, cool. More metaphors for us. Thanks. More symbols.
Right. Really cool way to like film it on a budget as well. I think that like they did a great job.
It was just such a unique design. I thought it worked pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I thought all the special effects in the film generally looked pretty good. The only thing I thought sometimes looked a little wonky was Gordy. But like, I mean, it makes sense why they use CG.
There was
like
an actor.
Yeah. Terry Nordery, who was in the Rise of the Planet of the Apes movies, and then I think he was in The Square as well. He's like one
also
of the premier.
Avatar.
Yeah, one of the. Well, he's going the new one or the original one.
The original.
Okay,
he might be in the new one too.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't seen it yet.
He's a premier motion capture actor, right up there with
him and Toby Kebbell are locking it down.
Andy Serkis, still.
Oh man, of course.
But yeah, I mean, I think I was really impressed with how much Peele was able to pull off with a budget of $70 million, which still astronomically high film, but for a film like this is pretty modestly scaled.
Underperforming a little bit at the box office, not disastrously, but certainly not as high as they want. But it could be a movie. It has all of August basically to itself, and so it could have legs. And I think word of mouth will help it.
Well, I was going to say, I certainly think a lot of that is the lack of promotion surrounding this movie. I mean, if you really think about it, compared to how like Get Out and Us, I mean, Get Out was promoted, I think, the most because that was like Jordan Peele's directorial debut, like go out and see this movie. Us, maybe just as much like, hey, if you like Get Out, come see this. But this one is like, I mean, I feel like Peele and Universal intentionally wanted people to be like, okay, don't watch a lot of trailers, don't see a lot of like, don't ask your friends how it was, just go see the movie, sorry. Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, this movie did Don't Look Up much better than Don't Look Up did.
I mean, Don't Look Up and Nope could have changed titles, for my opinion, I think.
For sure, yeah.
I definitely, I hope for Nope that Jordan Peele, continues to do original stuff. Like, I hope that he doesn't go back to the Get Out well, because that was so profitable, And I like that he's been doing something different every time. And, he said, I think multiple times, he's like, I got other ideas. So I hope that Universal keeps lifting him up because they have a true talent, on their hands. And it's such a great fit, studio to director. I think that they just really connect so far. All right. Well, I guess that's a good place for us to call it. We've been talking for a minute, but, last call for any hot takes, cool takes, or in-between takes.
I'll say two more things and then I'm good to end it. For one, I just wanted to talk about how we alluded to it before, but a lot of people have been complaining about like, oh, they're not really explaining a lot in this movie. There's a lot that's left, vague. And I have to kind of balk at that criticism because I feel like people complained a lot during Us, and then even some respect would Get Out, like, oh, there's too much exposition. Like they explain too much. And it's like, so I'm sorry, like, gotta pick one or the other. Like, do you want them to be a little bit more obtuse and metaphoric, or do you want them to kind of explain it? I mean, gotta pick a lane.
I always prefer the ambiguity as long as it's done well.
Absolutely. I agree. I just wanted to kind of get that off my chest. It was a mild pet peeve of mine. The other thing I was just going to say is this movie reminded me a decent bit of one of my favorites from last year, All Light Everywhere, and any movie that can... Oh, yeah,
Corey made that comparison.
Oh, did he? Oh, that makes sense, yeah. Any movie that can remind me of that film is A-okay in my book, I say. So That's all I got left.
All right. But what about you, Adonis? Anything to write home about?
I'll just say that, like, going back to, like, thinking why is Jordan Peele such a talked about director, so incomparable. I think that it's also just because he makes a lot of black stories with black characters that aren't so much traumatic. And I think that like we talked about this with Candyman, and there's also like an Emmett Till movie coming out, and those movies are fine. I think it's great that there's still movies like that to sort of showcase history, because it happened. We should educate people on it. But it's also there's so many directors, white directors, and even directors of different color, who can tell stories that aren't so much about trauma. And I'm glad that Peele is kind of going away from that and kind of just telling stories that, because there's a lot in Nope that I feel like definitely connects to black trauma or black reality, but it's not so much saying like, hey, times were hard, here's how. It's like, it's good that he is moving away from Get Out and kind of just making stories that he wants to make, as a black creator. So I think that's also another reason why he's such a sought out director and such an incredible director, because he has like a certain perspective that not a lot of people will have. And he's given the platform to kind of tell it. Yeah, that's really it for me.
All right. Well, Nope is now playing in theaters. Nope laying in anyway. We'll be back next week. I'm not sure yet what we're going to talk about, Will. I'd like to talk about Marcel the Shell with Shoes On.
If you want to do that. We
could also talk about Vengeance, Resurrection.
Sure.
A couple smaller things.
Yeah.
Let me know, because I've been ready to talk about Marcel the Shell since June. Let's go.
I mean, if you want, I could see it tomorrow if you want to talk about it.
I think that would be best, but okay. I am biased in the sense that I have an opinion, and my opinion is that Marcel the Shell with Shoes On is better than anything else I've seen lately, so who knows?
Sure. I'll take your word for it. I haven't seen it myself.
Thanks, Adonis, for coming on the show and, just peeling back the layers with us. I'm going to do that joke one more time to just really bury it into the ground, ruin my reputation.
That was great.
But yeah, we'll hope to see you again soon. From the Internet, California, I'm John Negroni.
From the Internet, Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
From a horse ranch in the middle of nowhere, Los Angeles, I'm Adonis Gonzalez.
See you next time.